Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is Barbara Talks Some More. I do have my original channel called Barbara Talks, so if you guys would like to learn more about astrology and your own natal charts, definitely check out that channel. Over here I am speaking on public figure natal chart readings and whatever else comes through to speak about on this channel. If you guys would like your own reading, Synastry reading, mini natal chart reading, or progressed natal chart reading, the information for all of that is going to be in the description box below. You guys can go on my website, select the readings tab. You guys can select which reading you would like. An email window should pop up, and then we can go from there. You guys send me an email, and then I'll send you guys all of the information. So today we are going to be going over Diddy and Cassie's Synastry here, okay? So I'm looking at their natal charts. I was just curious for myself, as per usual. I have been keeping up with the case so far, okay? All of the daily updates. So trigger warning for those of you who are tuning into this video. If you haven't been keeping up with the case, like the daily updates and so on and so forth, in this video, I might mention things like sexual abuse, domestic violence, anything of that sort. So just trigger warning early on. If that is something that is triggering for you, definitely shut off the video now. We are going to be going over their natal charts here, okay? I'm going to be giving you guys my impressions as to what is going on between these two individuals. I was mainly curious to know like what drew them to each other, okay? So when I was hooking into the energy, and also by the way, before I even get started, everything in this video is alleged. It is for educational purposes only, okay? And also if you guys have any of these aspects or placements either in your own natal charts or in synastry with other people, doesn't mean it's going to play out this way. Okay, so that's something important to keep in mind. This is just how I am currently interpreting the charts for these two individuals. So for those of you who don't know, basically, long story short, Cassie and Diddy met each other. She was 19 and then I believe he was 36. So there's a bit of an age gap difference there, okay? Young, impressionable. She was excited to join the music industry, okay? And I might be missing some details here and there, but in a nutshell, basically right away he signed her over, okay, to his record label, record company. And now I don't remember if it was for 10 years or longer or something of that sort, but it was for an extended period of time, okay, she signed with him. So for all the young people out there, okay, before your prefrontal cortex develops, all of these people, these energy vampires, okay, and pretty much these demons, okay, in my own opinion, allegedly, okay, they're going to try to come after you when you are young, before your prefrontal cortex develops. They want to get you to sign anything, really, okay? It could even be something like a marriage too, okay? That's pushed into everyone's faces as well. You know, I was just thinking about it today, and personally, I think, you know, the age to make any sort of big purchases or big decisions, big financial decisions, marriage, all these things, I think everybody should wait. It's just my own opinion. I think everybody should wait until their prefrontal cortex develops, okay, before you get financially tied to anybody, okay, or any sort of contract that is difficult to get out of, okay? So she got involved with this contract, and this happens to a lot of people allegedly in the music industry. They get them when they're young. You're impressionable, you're excited, you think your dreams are coming true, and soon, before you know it, it turns into a nightmare, okay? Especially these types of situations that kind of seem they could be too good to be true, okay? You know, they kind of take advantage. Again, you're young, you're excited, you're impressionable, you know, you feel like your dream is coming true, and before you know it, it's turning into a nightmare, unfortunately, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, obviously you guys have the free will to do what you want, but it's really, really this, okay? And I just have my own theories. I talk about this over there on my threads, okay? Check out my threads, you guys. My theory, you know, as to why they do this, the dark energies that exist down here, is because of the fact that they want to energetically bind people, first of all, either to them or to other people or to situations or to circumstances. Any sort of contract, you guys, anything that is going to be binding, okay? You guys have to understand, these are binding things, binding rituals, okay? It could literally be any type of contract you sign, okay? It doesn't just have to be, you know, involving another person. It could be something to do with, you know, let's say it is some sort of investment or whatever it is, okay? Before your prefrontal cortex develops, usually it's harder to see the bigger picture. It's harder to see things clearly, and then you get bound to either the situation. More often than not, it is a person, actually, okay? But whatever it is, okay, you get bound, energetically bound in a situation, and then, you know, it's usually before the first Saturn return, which is interesting because the first Saturn return usually coincides with the development of your prefrontal cortex, and then unfortunately, most people then try to spend their lives on binding themselves, okay, from these situations where they were energetically bound, and all of that is to keep the people reincarnating down here continuously, okay, on the reincarnation loop. Again, just my own opinion, allegedly, okay? Just from existing here and witnessing all of these situations. So again, big decisions and all these things, right? And this is also why they push youth on people and to do things when you're young, and, you know, they chase after young people and like all these things. Part of the reason is they want their energy vampires can usually, young energy is untainted, okay, not traumatized, hopeful, full of life, right? So it's just like these demons get excited when they are ruining that, okay, that hope, that spark within people, okay, because they're just demons is really, really what it is. Again, allegedly my own opinion. Most people, okay, are vessels for dark energies, and I have videos on that on my main channel over there, okay? One of them is called How Entities Attach, so it's going to be really important to learn these things, okay, so you guys can be aware, okay, when these people come into your vicinity. So like I mentioned, you know, they go after the young people, again, to bind them before their first Saturn return. Because personally, I find that your life actually starts around your first Saturn return, which happens to coincide with your prefrontal cortex developing. You change, okay, your brain fully forms, and then you are able to see the bigger image. It's easier for you to get a clear image of what it is that you were trying to do down here, okay? You're going to be more on your path, okay, because Saturn clears things out. Up until that point in time, you know, you are soul searching still, okay? So then a lot of people get lost in the sauce, again, in these situations and circumstances, and then spend their whole lives either lost or trying to unbind themselves or kind of roaming around aimlessly. That's pretty much what I have to say about that. So anyways, going back to these two. So yes, their age difference was large, so that's already a red flag to begin with, okay? You know, this whole age difference situation. Now, you know, it's interesting because I was just looking at the charts before I even got started with the reading here, just to kind of get a feel for the energy, because to me, I look at these things intuitively, okay? I hook into the energy here, and I'm not going to be doing like a full-blown in-depth reading here. I'm just going to kind of give you guys my first impressions as to what is taking place between these two. But it's really interesting because, you know, just in my mind, I already knew that Diddy was a Scorpio because everyone's talking about how he's a Scorpio, and like everything that he did or does, okay, is very shadow Scorpio energy, okay, again, allegedly and all these things. But to me, you know, I was kind of hooking into an energy, and I'm like, okay, is Lilith involved here? Like, what is going on between these two? And just looking at the energies here, one of the first things that I noticed first of all, the first thing that I did notice was he's born on the 4th, okay? So in numerology, the 4-day number, it's all about law and order, okay? So it's interesting because, you know, now he's in this whole legal situation, and based off of the numerology here, because he is born on the 4th, like these people are meant to be very careful when it comes to the law. They have to do everything properly. They're not meant to cut corners. So it's really interesting that he ended up getting quote unquote caught, okay? Or just like that this is being taken to trial. Do you know what I mean? And I'm curious to know, because again, I don't know the full story. Okay, I've been keeping up with the trial currently, but I'm not sure what the full story here is as to what prompted Cassie to put this out there. Because kind of when I was hooking into the energy more so psychically earlier, when I was thinking about this, it kind of feels like, to me at least, right? Like he's kind of like the scapegoat in this situation. Do you know what I mean? And obviously, like I still think that he's completely at fault here. But the thing is, he's part of a much larger, okay, allegedly, situation here that is going on with all of this sexual, I don't even know what the word is to use here. This is something that is so dark, so demonic. Yes, it is siphoning, okay, but this is like some next level dark magic stuff that is going on here, okay? I can't even get into that, unfortunately, okay, all the way in this video here, okay, with these demons. These are demons, okay? This is what everyone needs to understand. These are demons, and they are sexual energy vampires, okay? That's the term. I don't know if anyone has ever come up with it before, okay? I don't know everyone in the world, unfortunately, okay? But, you know, more than anything, not only are people harvesting energy down here, they're harvesting sexual energy, and they want the sexual energy to manifest for themselves, okay? And it's almost like this, like, first of all, everything is inverted, yes, but it's almost like they get this, like, kick out of, okay, to, you know, just like degrade people or, you know, just like humiliate them. Like all of these dark things, okay, these dark demons, okay, are almost like enjoying it. They're feeding off of that energy, okay, because some of the things so far that I heard in the trial, and this is just getting started, you know, this is just getting started. It is some dark stuff, you know, that was taking place. And it's like, back to him being a scapegoat, personally, you know, there's something here that's taking place with him where he either didn't listen to someone or he probably, you know, annoyed someone. I'm going to try not to swear in this video either. Okay, maybe he upset someone. Like there's something that took place here where he is now taking the fall for his level of this, okay, whatever he's doing in these parties. But this is something that happens in those higher levels, okay? It's really, really important to understand any of these higher level people, okay? First of all, they have to do the darkest things to even get into these groups, allegedly, okay? But it's just like, think about the type of person that even craves that type of power. Do you know what I mean? Like in my opinion, it's someone who was the biggest loser when they were younger, okay? And then they finally get the power and they're just like unleashing all of their anger and repressed feelings on the entire world, okay? First and foremost. So it's kind of like, this is kind of what's happening on a bigger scale here, okay? And maybe some of you guys have heard of certain things that have taken place in the city called Dubai, okay? I'm gonna have to spell it out here, but it's just like, again, allegedly, you know, it's deep, okay? This is a whole, it's like a whole network, okay? It's a whole thing here with all of these people. This is international, right? So I find it interesting that he is taking the hit for this, that he is a scapegoat, because to me it kind of symbolizes that, again, allegedly, just my own opinion, there's something here where he didn't listen to someone, or he upset someone, or maybe he was overly power hungry, like in the situation, maybe, again, because the thing is that ego, the bigger it gets, you know, the more power hungry the energy gets, you know, they think they're on top of the world, they think they can do whatever they want. And then who knows, maybe he upset someone, okay, and they threw him under the bus. Because I find it interesting. I'm really curious to know, like, what triggered all of this, okay? What made all of this start is really, really what that is. So that's one of the impressions that I had too in this whole situation, because there's something here where he upset someone, because it's like, again, it's all of them, allegedly, in my own opinion. All of these higher up people are involved in all of these disgusting things, okay? But now he is taking the fall for it, which is interesting. Again, in terms of the numerology, he's born on the 4th. That's that number of law and order, okay? So I don't think he's going to get away with this unless, again, you know, he quote unquote takes himself out, okay, allegedly, like all of them, and disappears somewhere into the abyss, right? But, you know, as of right now, this is what's happening. So I'm curious to see, right? I'm recording this, by the way, on May 14th, okay? In my head, I was like, I should start putting the dates into my videos, because by the time I edit them, it might be a few days, you know, down the line, and other information could come through at that point in time, right? Other information about the trial. But that's when I'm recording this. So this is based off of all the information that we have so far. So that's another thing that I was picking up on. Now, okay, so I talked about the 4-day number. So yes, that was one of the first things. The other thing that I noticed too was the fact that Cassie, again, you know, we're basing all of this, assuming that all of this information is true. Do you know what I mean? Because we have the birthdays online. We don't have the times of birth here, okay? So we're going to go based off the fact, let's say all of this information is true, because that's another thing too. Like, who knows if they actually give away like their actual birth information, like their real birth information, because again, all these people work with astrologers, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you're wise, you wouldn't be posting your birth information online, because then everybody can, you know, snoop into your business, right? So again, we're just going to assume that it is correct, and we're going to kind of do the reading based off of that. But again, I'm also intuitively kind of hooking into the energy here at the same time. So anyways, the birthdays that I have here for them, for Diddy, I have him here as November 4th, 1969, born in New York City, New York. Okay, we don't have the time of birth for him. And same thing, we don't have the time of birth for Cassie either. Okay, for Cassie, I have her here as 26th of August, 1986, born in New London, Connecticut. Okay, also in the United States. Interesting, she's also a life path 4. I'm seeing that just now. So there it is. There's that law and order energy, which is interesting that, you know, first of all, because they kind of have both that similar energy taking place in their energy field, they're both 4s, why they would have been attracted to each other. But at the same time, what's interesting to me too is the fact that she's also kind of bringing that justice, okay, in this situation. And it's interesting, both of them have a bunch of Libra energy in their charts. Like, look, he has Venus in Libra, and she also has Venus in Libra, which is interesting, because something that I've been thinking about with Venus and Libra recently is, first of all, yes, it's an attractive energy. You might have a lot of lovers, okay? People are going to be attracted to you in general, okay? And just like you kind of give off that vibe. But at the same time, with Venus and Libra, it's like, either you are bringing justice to your relationships, okay? So there's some sort of karmic balance that happens in your relationships. Either you bring it to the relationships, or in general, relationships for you are some form of karmic balance, okay? Like either, you know, the people that are involved with you are bringing karmic balance to your life, or you are bringing karmic balance to other people's lives, having that Libra energy in there, okay? Because that's overall what Libra is here to do, okay? To bring through balance. So it's interesting that both of them have Venus and Libra, because that's karmic already, okay? And it's conjunct for the two of them here. So both of them have Libra, Venus conjunct. So that means, like, you know, the way they love, I'm gonna use that term very loosely, especially for him, because there's definitely no love here. But at least, you know, in terms of like the first impression here, because usually the Synastry anyways is the first impression, okay, of a relationship. You know, to see how the relationship is going to grow and develop, you want to look at the composite charts as well, okay? But, you know, in general, both of the Libras are conjunct, so I can see how the attraction took place, okay? Now, the other impression that I had here too, okay? So his moon is in Virgo, and then she is a Virgo sun, okay? Now, the thing is, for him, we don't have the degrees of the moon, because again, we don't have the time. So it could be anywhere from 2 to 14 degrees. And then her sun is at 3 degrees. Okay. So if we look at it, I personally look up to 10 degrees of an orb. Okay. But here, let's say, you know, he is at the furthest, you know, energy, right? Let's say his moon is at 14 degrees, for example. And then her sun is at 3 degrees. Let's say if we're more generous with the orb, okay, because some people look up to 15. So if we look at a wider orb, okay, this energy would be conjunct. So basically what's happening here is she is actually the outward expression. Her sun, that's the ego, that's the identity. She is the outward expression of his internal world, okay, is basically what that is. So there's something interesting going on here, because the thing is with Scorpio, and unfortunately when, you know, that Scorpio energy, which is feminine and fixed, falls into a shadow masculine individual, okay, it really goes into power and control, controlling behaviors, jealousy, manipulation, all these things. Now, there's some stories here that I've heard, okay, from the trial where people are saying, you know, they were both jealous and possessive of each other, which I do see in the Synastry as well. There's actually a bunch of Pluto aspects taking place here. But what's interesting here is it's mainly Cassie's Pluto that's aspecting his internal placement. So for example, Mars square Pluto here is, and this is in the Synastry aspect of things, okay? So her Pluto is squaring his Mars. So here is the whole abuse situation that is taking place, okay? Mars square Pluto in Synastry, yes, is gonna be, you know, intense sexual attraction, but what I always say in these videos, especially when we look at Synastry, what you're meant to do when you have intense sexual attraction is you are meant to clear the energy, okay? You're meant to get the energy from the lower chakras, transmute it, and go into the higher chakras. Unfortunately, we live on an earth plane and most people don't do that, okay? So more often than not, manifests into violence, intense energy, especially the square. So if you guys have this in Synastry with someone, you know, there's no need to fear. You just have to see how evolved is the other person and are they willing to work on themselves, because that strong sexual attraction is going to bring up a lot of issues. It's going to bring up anything that is going on. That's what the sexual energy is the healing energy. Anything that is going on at the base of the spine, especially because it's Pluto, is going to deal with control, jealousy, manipulation, power. And when you have these Pluto aspects taking place in a relationship, there's always going to be some sort of power struggle, okay, basically taking place. Now, what's interesting is because it's her Pluto that's aspecting his personal placements, okay, because I saw a few other ones here too. Her Pluto is conjuncting his sun, and then her Pluto is conjuncting his Mercury, and then there's one from him, okay, one from his side, which is Pluto opposing her Jupiter, but that's a little further out. With these aspects, like, you're not going to feel them as much. And same thing, like his Saturn is opposing her Pluto, like the Saturn opposing Pluto, because it's generational, like, you know, it's not the main character in the story, it's there, right? This is still power struggles, but this is also business, right? You know, when you have Saturn aspects, you will see this in terms of like business deals, business arrangements, but sometimes the energy with Saturn and Pluto is kind of like who's going to be the boss, okay? But mainly what's happening here is, like, again, you'll feel the potency more with Pluto when it's aspecting the personal placements, okay? So because there's a lot of Pluto from her side going to his side, what I feel like, okay, when I pull this up and just intuitively here is I actually feel like he was threatened by her power. And unfortunately, the way it manifested was him trying to belittle her, okay? And it's so interesting in all of these situations, okay? Even in a few other readings that I've done, you know, the person in the beginning who might quote unquote feel threatened by the other individual, because sometimes to me when I see people who are trying to quote unquote sexually conquer someone, okay, it usually comes from them actually feeling powerless to the other person, especially when they use that type of terminology. So it's interesting because it's like in one way, shape, or form, there was almost like this fear or this subconscious fear that she would quote unquote overthrow him or be more powerful than him, or like this threatened energy. This is probably happening subconsciously. I doubt that this was conscious because he was probably already on his high horse, especially during that period of time. Okay, he was one of the most powerful men in the music industry, but you know, subconsciously the energy is there. Okay, so I think he tried to suppress her so she wouldn't quote unquote overthrow him. Okay, and this is all happening subconsciously. I mean, obviously there's other things happening here too in terms of just like hating the feminine and trying to degrade the feminine and putting the feminine into, you know, these like humiliation types of situations, humiliation types of rituals. That's ultimately what all of this is actually rooted in. Okay, it's the deep hatred for the feminine energy. And by the way, this has nothing to do with actual like gender. Okay, when I talk about feminine energy, I'm talking about the heart space and actually the connection to God, okay, which everyone is meant to have within them. Okay, but for people who are trapped in their lower chakras, they're actually kind of operating out of the hell realms, and a lot of them are basically either fragmented, you know what I mean? Like they're not in tune with their heart space, so they're not actually fully integrated, right? They're operating out of fear, wounding, all of these lower chakra things, which then allows entities to enter their vessel. And by the way, when I speak on entities, I'm not, you know, taking the responsibility away from the person themselves, but at some point, you know, someone gets so taken over by these entities that it's not even them anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's just like an entity that is operating through them, okay? And these entities are always attacking, quote unquote, the light, the feminine energy, and actually God, okay? That's actually what it's all rooted in, okay? Of course, you know, since the beginning of time, it's been a fight between good versus evil, okay? But the ultimate hatred here is toward God, okay? Toward the higher energies, and that's what these darker energies are always trying to do. They're always trying to bring the higher beings down and also energetically lock them, okay, into this realm. But yeah, they're very parasitic, they're very dark, and they need to siphon off of the creative beings, okay? And again, this is an energy, so it doesn't really matter what the gender is, okay? Usually you have people who are more in their heart space in general. The ultimate end goal is for everyone to be integrated, right? and your masculine feminine energy. The feminine energy is, yes, the sacral chakra. I see it as the sacral chakra sometimes, but I also see it as the heart space. You're operating out of the heart space, and it's your connection to God. And also, in my opinion, it's the exit, okay, from this realm, right? And then the people who are cut off from that are stuck and trapped in their lower chakras, literally like the devil card in the tarot, and they basically are operating in the darker energies, the darker realms, the darker entities, okay? And it's basically what's happening down here in this realm, okay? Now, what's interesting also is, there's a picture here of Cassie when I pulled up her birth chart, okay, because I was looking for her birth chart on different websites, but there's this picture of her here, and she looks so young and so precious. And yeah, they were definitely after her light, okay? Her and whatever other demons were involved in this, which I personally think it's multiple. It's not just him, okay? He's kind of the face of it all, but I think this is all happening from a higher level, okay? And I love that she is, I know it must be hard for her, but I love that she's putting herself out there and basically reclaiming her power, okay? That's kind of what's happening here. There's like the theme of reclaiming power, okay, in this situation, because he and his goal, okay, energetically, okay, whether he's consciously doing it or unconsciously, okay, is to diminish her power, okay, is to, try to make her feel small. And in doing that, he feels more powerful, okay? Again, the demonic energy, that's just how it operates down here. Some people might look at it as a narcissistic energy, okay? It's an energy that flows through people, okay? When their vessels are opened and they are more, in tune with the darker energies and the lower version of the self, okay? So that's kind of what's happening here. Now, another thing also that I found interesting, because I was kind of like, just when I was hooking into the energy before I even looked at the charts, I was like, okay, is Lilith involved here? So I went to go look at Lilith to see what's happening here. And unfortunately, we don't have the houses, right? We'd have way more information if we knew the houses, whose planets fell into whose house, and all these things. And I'd have to sit with the energy a little bit longer just to like kind of focus on the energy to see just intuitively what I think the rising sign would be, and maybe play around with the energies to see where everything would fall like into what house, okay? But I'm not going to do that now, okay? This is, again, I just pulled this up, right? That would take a little bit more time. But it's okay. We have the information that we have. We're going to kind of go based off of that. So something that I found interesting was I wanted to look at Lilith here. And it's interesting because there's Lilith happening from both of their sides, essentially, okay? So her Lilith is actually trining his Venus, okay? So that's interesting. And then her Lilith is also trining his Jupiter, and then it's squaring the Pluto, okay? So Lilith trine Venus, again, this is like the darker side of relationships, or this being activated in this dynamic between the two of them, okay? The darker side of relationships. But what I found interesting is her Lilith, okay, squaring his Pluto, which is interesting because to me, Lilith is more ruthless than Pluto, okay? Pluto, yes, can be ruthless, but with Pluto, you still have death and rebirth, and there is some sort of regeneration factor that does ultimately happen with Pluto. Lilith, not so much. So again, here's the energy where I pick up on this again, where it's like he almost picked up on this from her side, that she would be, quote unquote, the end of him, or, when I say end of him, I don't mean that literally. I just mean like, the end of the empire, or again, him feeling powerless to her in one way, shape, or form. So like kind of energetically trying to beat her to it. But look at this, okay? The tables have turned. So that Lilith is being activated, which good for her, okay? She's really, really coming into her power in this situation. Now from his side, we have his Lilith that is sextiling her moon, okay? So that is just basically the hatred toward the feminine overall being activated here, okay? The Lilith to the moon. Then we also have his Lilith that is squaring her Venus as well. So we have Lilith that is squaring her Venus as well. So again, dark relationships, taboo types of relationships happening here, which by the way, I also noticed, okay, in their synastry as well. When I was looking at the aspects here, they had a Venus sextile Uranus, okay? When you see Venus sextile Uranus, this will start off usually unexpectedly, the relationship. It could be an affair. It could be a hidden relationship. It could be a relationship that you never thought you would get into, okay? And it's his Venus that is actually sextiling her Uranus. Obviously, there's a power issue here, okay, and a power imbalance between the two of them, okay? But it's interesting because it's like there's that Venus sextile Uranus, okay? And it's a sextile, so you don't feel it as much, but still it's part of the story here, which is really, really interesting, okay? So I'm just going back to the Lilith. Also with his Lilith, okay, his Lilith is trining her Jupiter, okay? It's trining her Saturn as well, okay, his Lilith. And then we also have his Lilith squaring her Pluto. So here's that energy coming up again, okay? So it's happening on both sides, the Lilith to Pluto aspect, okay? So power struggles, power issues, okay? And Lilith destroys, okay? So again, Pluto destructs and rebuilds, right? Because that's Pluto's transformation. But Lilith, when it's activated in the shadow, is going to destruct, okay? It's going to burn something to the ground, right? So it's interesting because it's like he, I guess, in one way, shape, or form, or, you know, his demonic side. I don't think he's consciously thinking this, okay? And again, everything's alleged. But, okay, the energy here, you know, I think he was kind of like, okay, like, she's not going to do anything. She's not going to say anything. There's an energy here from his side where he thinks he's high and mighty, right? And, or thought in the past, okay, that, you know, this wouldn't go anywhere, right? I'm sure somebody of this type of character got used to always basically paying people off and, you know, being in a powerful position, right? But the tables have turned, essentially, is really, really what that is. So good for her being out there. And it's so interesting because look, his Lilith, okay, is actually squaring her North Node. So all of this activated her into her life purpose, okay, this whole situation, right? Because this is going to basically unravel Pandora's box, in my own opinion, allegedly, okay? A lot of stuff is going to come out, I think, okay, after this situation, because I think a lot of people are involved, and then it's just going to be like a spider web, okay? A lot of things are going to start unraveling bit by bit. Maybe not, you know, this instant, but I do think eventually. Now, a few other mentions in this video as well, because, you know, I could go on for like literally so long if I analyze both of their charts in depth. And the Synastry, again, I just wanted to do like a, you know, first impressions type of video. But another thing that I did notice also when I pulled up the charts here, just like individually for Cassie, she has a bunch of sun aspects, okay, taking place here. Sun square moon, sun conjunct Mercury, sun trine Mars, sun square Saturn, sun trine Neptune, sun sextile Pluto, okay? To me, this usually symbolizes a lot of karma with the father, because I was also wondering like where was her family and all of this, what's going on with the father and all these things, okay? The sun can also be the father or the dominant masculine in your life, and then in turn masculines in your life, okay? So with all the sun energy here, specifically the sun square Saturn, the energy that I was kind of getting here was also because the sun is trining Neptune as well, and even the sun sextile Pluto, okay? Maybe the dynamic was either similar with the father maybe was controlling or like a disciplinarian, because that sun square Saturn to me is kind of like she's looking for some sort of authoritative figure in masculines in her life overall, okay? That sun square Saturn. So I can see how she was attracted to someone who was a lot older than her. Do you know what I mean? Because of the sun square Saturn, the Saturn is like that father figure. You're kind of looking for a father figure, because even in your own charts, you guys can check, you know, if you're into men, okay, or masculines, or people who operate out of the masculine energy, you can look at the sun to see what kind of energy are you pulling through, like what's the personality type, right? And then she's got the sun sextile Pluto. There's that scorpionic energy taking place in her chart. Or if you're into women or feminines, okay, you can look at the moon. So for the masculines and the men, and I have a video on this on my main channel as well, where you guys can check it out for yourselves. For masculines or men, or again, people who operate out of the masculine energy, you can look at the sun aspects, you can look at the Mars and what's going on with the sun and the Mars, and sometimes even the Saturn, okay? For women or people who operate out of the feminine energy, okay, or again, dominant feminine role in your life as well, the moon is going to be the mother, right? But then in turn, it'll be the feminine energy that you're pulling through or into, and same thing with Venus, okay? So that's kind of what you would look at. And in general, it doesn't just have to be romantic relationships. Your friends could be like this as well, for those of you who are interested in checking that out for yourselves. So yeah, it's interesting, right? Sun trine Mars, he could have been aggressive, even the father, and now, you know, Diddy kind of brings through this aggression as well. So that's another mention that I wanted to mention in this video as well, okay? She does have Venus sextile Uranus in her own chart, so already this is unconventional relationships taking place here for her. In his chart, something that I also wanted to mention and notice right away was, because I was like, okay, so he's into all of this, right, sexually. Obviously, we're going to look at the Mars to see what's going on, right? He has Mars for Saturn, kind of gives me like a vibe that because it's Saturn, it's basically an energy that's delayed, right? So it's like, I kind of feel like maybe he didn't get a lot of people when he was young. Again, think about it this way, right? This is the way that I see it these days. A lot of the people who were either like rejected when they were young, or people who didn't want them, right? Whether it's from the opposite sex or friends or whatever, right? They kind of have this like pending rage in them, and that's usually what fuels them, right? To go after these like intense, powerful positions, right? A lot of the time, people who want power are people who felt powerless when they were younger, okay? If we really explored it. And again, this is just my own opinion. Allegedly, I'm not a psychologist. That's another one of my disclaimers. So that's basically what's happening here too. So with the Mars square Saturn, again, maybe he didn't get people at a young age, and then when he started to actually get people or get sexually involved or something of that sort, right, he started like kind of going into the power tripping energy. Because look, he has Mars trine Pluto. That's that power tripping energy, especially when it comes to sexuality. And again, it isn't going to manifest this way for everybody, okay? It isn't going to manifest this way for everybody. And again, it's a trine, so you might not necessarily feel it as much, okay? With the trine energy, right, it's something that's a little bit more subtle and in the background, but it's still there, okay? And then he has Mars sextile Neptune. Again, this is like no boundaries when it comes to sex overall. And then Mars trine Uranus is like a very unique, you know, expression of your sexuality in general. Somebody who's going to be into very unique things. So again, it kind of makes sense if we look at these aspects in his chart. Again, if all of this information is actually accurate in terms of his birthday and all these things, okay? Well, you know, it kind of makes sense. He was into these things, right? Kind of took a turn in like an extreme dark direction, right? Kind of went really dark, but you know, it's there. It's there in his chart, like all of these interests of his. So those are a few things that I noticed, okay, kind of like from my first impressions here of looking at the chart of these two. I'm curious to see what else ends up happening with this trial. I'm going to wrap up this video here, you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.